German Army courier vanished in 1944. 81 years later, his sealed train car was found. September 17, 2024, the morning mist hangs heavy over the Białowieża forest, straddling the border between Poland and Belarus. A team of railway infrastructure engineers from Polish State Railways, led by senior surveyor Tomasz Kowalski, begins routine inspection of abandoned track sections. They're cataloging decommissioned rail lines for a proposed heritage railway project. What they find will rewrite a footnote of World War II history that had remained sealed for 8 decades. The survey team's ground-penetrating radar picks up an anomaly 2.4 kilometers from the main abandoned line. Dense vegetation has consumed what was once a functional siding track, now buried under 81 years of forest growth. Kowalski orders his team to clear the area. By 11:30 hours, they've exposed rusted rails leading into what appears to be a deliberately camouflaged rail tunnel carved into a limestone embankment. "We thought it was a storage depot initially," Kowalski later tells investigators from Poland's Institute of National Remembrance. The entrance had been sealed with concrete blocks and overgrown so thoroughly that even satellite imagery missed it. Inside the tunnel, positioned exactly 47 meters from the entrance, sits a single Deutsche Reichsbahn freight car. Model designation, GKLM 104, manufactured in Stuttgart 1942. Serial number, Dr. 5428831. The car's wooden panels have rotted in places, but its contents remain remarkably preserved by the cool, dry conditions inside the limestone tunnel. More significantly, the car's door bears an official German military seal, unbroken, dated October 18, 1944. The discovery itself is remarkable enough, but what makes engineers immediately contact authorities is what they find painted on the car's exterior, barely visible under decades of mineral deposits. Sondertransport, Heerespostmeister Abteilung 583, Special Transport, Army Postal Service Unit 583. Dr. Helena Nowak, a forensic historian from the University of Warsaw, arrives on site September 19th with a team from the IPN's Bureau of Historical Investigation. When they carefully break the seal and slide open the reinforced door, they find themselves looking at what appears to be a makeshift living quarters. A military cot, tinned rations, German manufacture, dated 1944, a portable field desk, and most significantly, a leather dispatch case bearing the embossed eagle of the Wehrmacht. Inside that case, identity documents for Hauptmann Karl Friedrich Hoffman, born April 3, 1909, in Königsberg, East Prussia. Military courier, attached to Army Postal Service Unit 583, responsible for transporting classified communications between German high command positions on the Eastern Front. The documents include his Soldbuch, military paybook, complete with photograph, fingerprints, and service record. Also present, 2 sets of false identity papers in different names, 847 Reichsmarks in cash, 4 gold bars stamped with Deutsche Reichsbank markings, and a detailed handwritten journal covering dates from September 1944 through February 1945. The official military records are unequivocal. Hauptmann Karl Friedrich Hoffman was killed in action on October 23, 1944, during the Soviet Army's advance into East Prussia. His death certificate, filed with German military administration in January 1945, states he died when his courier vehicle struck a Soviet anti-tank mine near Goldep, approximately 180 kilometers north of where his sealed train car now sits. His body was reportedly never recovered due to the chaos of the rapidly collapsing German defensive lines. But the journal found in the train car tells a radically different story. The final entry, dated February 11, 1945, written in precise German script, reads, "The tunnels have held. Spring will bring either liberation or capture. If anyone finds this record, know that I chose survival over duty. May God forgive what I have done to ensure it." Dr. Noack photographs the documents, catalogs the evidence, and immediately recognizes the historical significance. The journal details not just Hoffman's survival, but an elaborate escape plan executed over 5 months, involving forged documents, stolen military supplies, collaboration with partisan groups, and a network of hidden supply caches stretching across 400 kilometers of occupied territory. The contradiction is stark. Official German military records document Hoffman's death. But here, sealed in a forgotten rail tunnel, sits physical evidence of his survival, along with what appears to be a detailed confession of desertion, identity fraud, and the systematic embezzlement of military resources to fund an escape. Over the following weeks, as investigators catalog the contents of the sealed car, they find additional evidence that deepens the mystery. A second identity document bearing a different photograph but Hoffman's fingerprints, correspondence addressed to a Henrik Olsen in Stockholm dated 1947, and a small leather-bound address book containing coded entries that, when deciphered, reveal contacts across 4 countries. The sealed train car in the Bialowieza forest has preserved not just artifacts but a secret. Carl Friedrich Hoffman did not die in 1944. He disappeared, and the evidence suggests he disappeared deliberately, methodically, and successfully. If you want to see what investigators found inside that journal, what Hoffman's escape plan actually entailed, and where the evidence suggests he ultimately went, hit the like button and subscribe. Because the story hidden in that sealed train car is about to reveal one of World War II's most meticulously planned vanishing acts. Carl Friedrich Hoffman was born on April 3, 1909, in Königsberg, the historic capital of East Prussia, now Kaliningrad, Russia. His father, Wilhelm Hoffman, worked as a senior postal administrator for the Reichspost, Germany's state postal service. His mother, Marguerite née Schumann, came from a family of Prussian civil servants. Carl was the eldest of 3 children, raised in the structured, duty-focused environment typical of Prussian bureaucratic families during the Weimar Republic era. Educational records from Königsberg Stadtgymnasium show Carl as an exceptional student, particularly in mathematics, languages, and geography. He graduated in 1927 with high marks and, following family tradition, entered the German Postal Service Training Academy in Berlin at age 18. By 1930, he had completed advanced courses in postal logistics, transportation coordination, and communication security, skills that would prove crucial to both his military career and eventual disappearance. Unlike many of his generation who joined the Nazi Party early, Hoffman's party membership didn't occur until 1937, relatively late, and appears to have been professionally motivated rather than ideologically driven. Colleagues later described him as apolitical, focused on efficiency and protocol rather than party dogma. He married Anna Elisabeth Kruger in 1933, a schoolteacher from Königsberg. They had 2 daughters, Greta, born 1934, and Liesel, born 1936. When Germany mobilized for war in 1939, Hoffman was 30 years old, already too senior in the postal service to be drafted into regular combat units. Instead, he was commissioned directly into the Feldpost, the military postal service, with the rank of lieutenant, second lieutenant. His civilian expertise in logistics and communications made him valuable for military postal operations, which by 1939 had become critical to German military coordination. Hoffman's military personnel file, declassified in 2002 and now housed in the German Federal Archives in Freiburg, reveals a soldier who excelled at administrative precision. He was promoted to Oberleutnant, first lieutenant, in 1941, and to Hauptmann, captain, in early 1943. His efficiency ratings were consistently excellent, and superior officers noted his exceptional organizational capabilities and absolute reliability in handling classified communications. What distinguished Hoffman from ordinary postal officers was his assignment to special courier duties beginning in 1942. As the war expanded and German forces operated across vast distances on multiple fronts, the Wehrmacht required dedicated couriers for transporting classified documents, operational orders, and strategic communications that couldn't be trusted to regular postal channels or radio transmission. Hauptmann Hoffman was assigned to Army Postal Service Unit 583, a specialized courier detachment attached to Army Group Center on the Eastern Front. This assignment gave Hoffman extraordinary mobility and access. Courier officers traveled between headquarters units, often crossing hundreds of kilometers of occupied territory. They carried diplomatic-style credentials that granted them priority on transport, exemption from routine inspections, and access to military supplies and accommodations across the entire operational theater. In essence, Hoffman possessed the military equivalent of a universal transit pass across German-occupied Eastern Europe. Between 1942 and 1944, Hoffman's travel logs show he made over 140 courier runs, transporting classified materials between Army Group Center headquarters in Minsk, various corps headquarters across Belorussia and eastern Poland, and occasionally to High Command East in East Prussia. He became intimately familiar with the geography, infrastructure, and logistics networks of the entire region, knowledge that would prove essential to his eventual disappearance. Those who knew Hoffman during this period describe a man transformed by the Eastern Front experience. Letters to his wife, preserved by his daughter Greta and now archived at the Prussian Museum in Lüneburg, reveal growing disillusionment. A letter dated July 1943 reads, "What I have witnessed in these courier duties weighs on my conscience. The things done in Germany's name here. I cannot speak of them, but they haunt my sleep." Another from December 1943. "I fear for what awaits us when this war turns, as it must. Those who have served here, seen what has been done, will face terrible reckoning." The historical context that shaped Hoffman's decision to vanish is crucial. By summer 1944, Germany's position on the Eastern Front had become catastrophic. Operation Bagration, launched by the Soviet Army on June 23, 1944, had destroyed Army Group Center, killing or capturing over 350,000 German soldiers in 5 weeks. The Red Army was advancing westward at unprecedented speed, liberating Soviet territory and pushing into Poland and the Baltic states. For Germans who had served in the occupied Eastern territories, especially those connected to military administration, the prospect of Soviet capture was terrifying. The Red Army, having discovered the mass graves, burned villages, and concentration camps left by German occupation, was in no mood for mercy. Summary executions of captured German officers were common. Those taken prisoner faced years, often decades, in Soviet labor camps. Very few ever returned. But Hoffman's situation was complicated by another factor. His wife and daughters had remained in Königsberg throughout the war. Anna worked as a teacher. The girls attended school. As late as August 1944, letters indicate the family lived relatively normal lives despite increasing Allied bombing. Hoffman sent money home regularly, wrote weekly letters, and planned to reunite with his family after the war. Then came August 27, 1944. British Royal Air Force bombers conducted a devastating nighttime raid on Königsberg. The attack destroyed much of the city center, including the residential district where the Hoffman family lived. Over 5,000 civilians were killed. Anna Elizabeth Hoffman, age 34, died when their apartment building took a direct hit. Greta, age 10, and Liesel, age 8, were at their grandmother's house outside the city and survived. Hoffman received official notification on September 3, 1944, while stationed at a courier way station near Bialystok, Poland. His commanding officers report notes. Hoffman received the news with visible distress but maintained composure. He requested 3 days compassionate leave to arrange family affairs. Request granted. This was the turning point. Hoffman traveled to Königsberg on emergency leave, September 5th through 7th. He visited the destroyed apartment, confirmed his wife's death, and made arrangements for his daughters to be evacuated westward with their grandmother to relatives in Lübeck, northern Germany, away from the advancing Soviet forces. On September 8th, he returned to duty. But something had changed. According to testimony from fellow officers collected by post-war investigators, Hoffman became withdrawn, methodical, almost mechanical in his duties. He seemed to be calculating something, one colleague later recalled. Every conversation felt like he was gathering information, measuring distances, evaluating opportunities. What officers didn't realize was that Hoffman, grief-stricken and facing the collapse of the Eastern Front, had made a decision. He would not die in the Soviet advance. He would not be captured. He would not face whatever war crimes tribunals awaited German military personnel after defeat. He had lost his wife. His daughters were safe in Western Germany. He had nothing left to lose and everything to gain by disappearing. His position gave him the means. As a Courier officer, he had unrestricted travel authorization, access to military supplies, knowledge of the entire logistics network, and most critically, the opportunity to move across hundreds of kilometers without arousing suspicion. In late September 1944, as the front lines disintegrated and military discipline collapsed amid retreat, Hauptmann Karl Friedrich Hoffman began executing what would become one of the most meticulously planned desertions of World War II. The plan required 3 things: a false death to stop anyone from searching for him, a hidden location where he could wait out the war's end, and a new identity to disappear into post-war chaos. Between September 8th and October 18th, 1944, Hoffman systematically assembled everything he would need. September 8th, 1944, 18:20 hours. Hauptmann Karl Friedrich Hoffman reports back to Army Postal Service Unit 583 headquarters, then temporarily located in a requisitioned manor house outside Bialystok, Poland. The Eastern Front has collapsed. The Soviet army advances daily. German forces conduct fighting retreats across eastern Poland and the Baltic states, trying to establish defensive lines that hold for days, or sometimes just hours before being overrun again. Hoffman's commanding officer, Major Ernst Dietrich, barely acknowledges his return from compassionate leave. The unit is in chaos, attempting to maintain courier service for an army in retreat. Documents must still move between fragmenting command structures. Communications must still reach headquarters. Even in defeat, the German military machine demands its paperwork. Hoffman requests and receives his next assignment: Courier run to transport classified operational orders from Bialystok to the Wehrmacht command post in Augusto, approximately 80 kilometers north, then continuing to Army Group North headquarters near Riga, Latvia. Total journey: over 400 kilometers through increasingly unstable territory. Departure date: September 12th. But Hoffman has a different plan. September 9th, 6:30 hours. Hoffman visits the unit's motor pool, requisitioning a Kubelwagen Type 82 utility vehicle and full fuel authorization for the Riga run. He then visits the supply depot, signing out additional provisions: 2 weeks field rations, medical supplies, map cases, weatherproof document containers, and 2 spare jerry cans of gasoline, all justified for a long-distance courier run through uncertain territory. No one questions a courier officer preparing for dangerous travel. September 10th. Hoffman spends the day studying maps in the intelligence office. He photographs supply depot locations, partisan activity reports, Soviet advance positions, and most significantly detailed railway infrastructure maps showing every line, siding, tunnel, and maintenance facility in the region. As a courier officer, he has unrestricted access to all operational intelligence. He memorizes the location of abandoned rail facilities, forest tracks, and little-used transportation routes. That evening, he carefully packages certain items from his personal belongings: his wife's photograph, his daughter's last letters, his wedding ring, his officer's dagger, items that would identify him. He places them in an envelope addressed to Hauptmann K.F. Hoffman, Wehrmacht Feldpost, with a note, "To be forwarded to my daughters in the event of my death." He leaves the envelope on his bunk where it will be found and processed according to standard procedures. September 11th, 14:20 hours. Hoffman visits the unit quartermaster and, using his courier authorization, requisitions additional supplies. Civilian work clothes in his size, listed as intelligence operations materials. Forged identity documents, blank templates, standard courier counterintelligence materials. 2,000 Reichsmarks in cash, operational funds for emergencies. And most audaciously, 4 gold bars from the unit's emergency currency reserves, each bar weighing 1 kilogram, stamped with Deutsche Reichsbank markings. He signs the requisition form with proper authorization codes. In the chaos of retreat, no one scrutinizes a senior courier officer's supply requests. September 12th, 5:45 hours. Departure day. Hoffman loads his Kubelwagen with official dispatch cases, personal gear, and the supplies he's accumulated. He signs out with proper authorization, receives a priority travel pass, and drives north from Bialystok. According to the official travel log, he's expected to reach Augusto by 1200 hours, deliver dispatches, then continue toward Riga. But at kilometer marker 34 on the Bialystok-Augusto road, Hoffman turns east onto a secondary forest road. His destination isn't Augusto. It's a location he's identified from the railway infrastructure maps, an abandoned rail maintenance facility near the village of Krinky, approximately 45 kilometers from Bialystok, deep in the Bialowieza forest region. 8:30 hours. Hoffman reaches the facility, a pre-war Polish state railways maintenance depot abandoned since 1941. The site includes a small office building, a storage shed, and critically, a short siding track leading into a limestone embankment where a tunnel was excavated for storing railway materials. The tunnel is approximately 60 meters deep, dry, concealed by vegetation, and most importantly, unknown to German military authorities. Hoffman spends the next 4 hours unloading supplies into the tunnel. He parks the Kubelwagen inside, covering it with tarps. Then he walks back to the main road carrying a full dispatch case and his military identification. September 12th, 14:30 hours. Hoffman flags down a German military convoy heading north, 3 trucks transporting wounded soldiers from a field hospital being evacuated ahead of the Soviet advance. He shows his courier credentials and requests priority transport to Augusto, explaining his vehicle broke down. The convoy commander, grateful for a courier officer's presence to authorize fuel requisitions at checkpoints, readily agrees. The convoy reaches Augusto at 17:30 hours. Hoffman thanks the commander, enters the Wehrmacht command post, delivers his dispatch case, containing routine communications he'd actually been assigned to transport, signs the delivery log, and requests accommodation for the night before continuing to Riga the next morning. The command post adjutant assigns him quarters in the officer's billeting house. September 13th, 400 hours. While the command post sleeps, Hoffman quietly leaves his quarters, carrying only a small pack. He walks to the town's rail yard, where he knows from intelligence reports that a supply train is being loaded for evacuation westward. He approaches the rail transport officer, shows his courier credentials, and requests space for urgent communications materials that need to reach Königsberg immediately. The transport officer, harried and overworked, waves him toward a freight car. Hoffman climbs aboard among crates of military equipment being evacuated. At 6:15 hours, the train departs Augusto heading northwest. This is where Hoffman's official military existence begins to blur. He is supposed to be en route to Riga. Instead, he's on a supply train heading toward Königsberg. But more significantly, he has left behind his Kubelwagen, loaded with supplies, hidden in a forest tunnel 45 kilometers from his last confirmed location. September 13, 1920 hours. The supply train reaches a rail junction near Suwałki, approximately 70 kilometers north of Augusto. During a scheduled stop for locomotive water resupply, Hoffman disembarks. He approaches the station commandant, explains he's awaiting courier materials being shipped from Königsberg, and requests accommodation until they arrive. The commandant assigns him to transit officers' quarters. What Hoffman actually does over the next 5 days reveals the meticulous execution of his plan. September 14th. Hoffman visits the rail junction's freight yards and identifies what he's been searching for: a single GKLM 104 freight car sitting on a maintenance siding, awaiting minor repairs. The car is empty, functional, and most importantly, not currently assigned to any transport schedule. September 15th. Using his courier authority, Hoffman requisitions the freight car for special military transport operations. He completes the paperwork identifying the car as carrying classified communications materials requiring secure storage. He has the car moved to an isolated siding. September 16th. Hoffman purchases civilian supplies in Suwałki using his requisitioned cash: tinned food, bottled water, blankets, candles, matches, basic tools, a portable camp stove, and medical supplies. He transports everything to the freight car and begins converting its interior into makeshift living quarters. September 17th. The critical step. Hoffman locates a locomotive engineer awaiting assignment and, using a combination of his authority and 3 gold bars, makes a proposition: transport the freight car to specific coordinates in the Białowieża forest, ask no questions, and forget the entire transaction. The engineer, recognizing the gold's value amid Germany's collapsing currency and his own uncertain future, agrees. September 18th, 2:30 hours. The locomotive, pulling only Hoffman's single freight car, departs Suwałki on a rarely used branch line heading south-southwest. They travel slowly, avoiding main lines, using secondary tracks through the vast Białowieża forest. Hoffman navigates using his photographed maps, directing the engineer to specific rail junctions and branch lines. 8:20 hours. They reach the abandoned maintenance depot where Hoffman's Kubelwagen remains hidden. The engineer positions the freight car on the siding leading into the tunnel. Hoffman unloads his supplies from the vehicle into the car, then drives the Kubelwagen 200 meters into the forest and sets it on fire, destroying any evidence. 9:40 hours. The engineer, paid in gold and sworn to silence, departs with his locomotive, leaving the single freight car sitting on the siding. Hoffman uses a portable winch and manual labor to gradually move the car 47 meters into the tunnel entrance, positioning it in complete concealment. Over the next 3 days, Hoffman works systematically. He uses explosives from his military supplies to trigger a controlled collapse of earth and stone at the tunnel entrance, making it appear naturally sealed. He leaves enough space for ventilation, but completely obscures the tunnel entrance from outside view. He then plants fast-growing forest vegetation around the site. Within weeks, nature will complete the concealment. Inside the freight car, now hidden in the sealed tunnel, Hoffman establishes his sanctuary: military cot, portable desk, supplies sufficient for 6 months, maps, his false identity documents, his journal, and the gold remaining to fund whatever comes next. Now comes the final step: creating his official death. September 23rd. Hoffman leaves his sealed tunnel on foot, hiking 15 kilometers through forest to reach a small village with Wehrmacht presence. He arrives exhausted, claiming to be a courier officer whose vehicle was ambushed by partisans. He shows his papers, still valid, still identifying him as Hauptmann Karl Friedrich Hoffman. The local garrison commander accepts his story, provides food and rest, and arranges military transport to the nearest major Wehrmacht command post at Grodno, 90 kilometers southwest. September 24th. At Grodno, Hoffman reports to the garrison headquarters and requests priority transport to continue his interrupted courier run to Riga. While awaiting vehicle assignment, he volunteers for a dangerous mission, personally delivering emergency operational orders to an isolated Wehrmacht position near Goldap, East Prussia, which is under threat of Soviet encirclement. The garrison commander, desperate for reliable courier officers, accepts. He assigns Hoffman a motorcycle and sidecar, dispatch cases marked with classified materials, and a Wehrmacht driver. October 18th, 6:30 hours. Hoffman and his driver depart Grodno heading north toward Goldap. This will be Hauptmann Karl Friedrich Hoffman's last confirmed journey. What the official military record states happened next. On October 23, 1944, approximately 15 kilometers south of Goldap, Hauptmann Hoffman's motorcycle struck a Soviet anti-tank mine on a contested road. The explosion killed both men instantly. Local Wehrmacht units recovered fragments of documents and a charred military identification tag bearing Hoffman's name and service number. Due to heavy Soviet artillery bombardment, proper body recovery was impossible. The remains were reported as destroyed beyond identification. On January 12, 1945, German military administration officially declared Hauptmann Karl Friedrich Hoffman killed in action. What actually happened? Hoffman never reached Goldap. According to the journal found in the sealed freight car, and corroborated by forensic evidence discovered in 2024, Hoffman and his driver stopped approximately 40 kilometers from Goldap at a Wehrmacht supply checkpoint. Hoffman, using his courier authority, dismissed his driver, stating he would continue alone for security reasons regarding classified materials. The driver, grateful to avoid the dangerous Goldap approach, returned to Grodno. Hoffman continued north for another 20 kilometers, then turned east onto a forest road. At a pre-scouted location, he staged an explosion using military explosives, destroying the motorcycle and sidecar. He scattered fragments of documents with his name. He placed his military identification tag, previously damaged and charred using chemical accelerants, among the wreckage. Then he hiked away from the staged death site. Over the next week, traveling only at night through forest paths, Hoffman made his way south and east, a journey of approximately 180 kilometers on foot. He carried civilian clothes, false identity papers identifying him as Henrik Olsen, a Baltic German agricultural laborer, and one remaining gold bar. November 1, 1944. Exhausted and half-starved, Hoffman reached his sealed tunnel. He climbed inside the freight car, sealed the door, and began what his journal calls the waiting. The official military record shows Hauptmann Karl Friedrich Hoffman died on October 23, 1944. But the evidence in the tunnel shows that on that date, he was very much alive, hidden in a sealed freight car deep in the Bialowieza forest, waiting for the war to end so he could become someone else entirely. September 19, 2024. Dr. Helena Nowak stands inside the limestone tunnel, her forensic team's portable lighting illuminating the freight car that hasn't been opened in 80 years. The moment they break the Wehrmacht seal on the door, musty air rushes out, carrying the scent of old leather, rusted metal, and decades of stillness. "We photograph everything before touching anything," Dr. Nowak instructs her team. "This is an archaeological site now. Every item has context. Every position tells a story." Over the next 6 days, the team meticulously catalogs 147 individual items recovered from the freight car. Each artifact undergoes preliminary documentation, photography, and careful removal for laboratory analysis. What emerges is a detailed portrait of a man preparing to vanish. September 20th. The forensic team discovers the dispatch case containing identity documents. The primary documents identify Carl Friedrich Hoffman with striking clarity. His Soulbutch military paybook includes his photograph showing a lean-faced man with intense eyes and a precise military demeanor. His service record from 1939 through 1944, his rank progression, and his assignment to Army Postal Service Unit 583. His fingerprints are stamped on multiple pages. But alongside the authentic documents, the team finds something more revealing: 2 sets of false identity papers. The first identifies Henrik Olsen, born 1907 in Tallinn, Estonia, occupation, agricultural worker. The photograph shows Hoffman without his military bearing, wearing civilian clothes, with several days of beard growth, looking gaunt and weathered. The second set identifies Friedrich Lindemann, born 1909 in Königsberg, occupation, postal administrator. This photograph shows Hoffman with glasses, a fuller beard and different styling, almost unrecognizable as the military officer in the Soulbutch. Dr. Camilla Wojcik, the team's document forensics specialist, examines the false papers under magnification. "These are exceptional forgeries," she reports. "The paper stock matches authentic Estonian and German administrative documents from the 1940s. The official stamps and seals are chemically consistent with period-correct inks. Whoever created these had access to genuine blank documents and official stamping equipment." The answer to that mystery lies in Hoffman's own journal. Entry dated September 15, 1944. Acquired identity template materials from Unit 583 counterintelligence stores. Standard Courier anti-partisan infiltration materials. No one questions a Courier officer's requisitions for covert operations. The photograph work I managed at Suwałki using civilian photographer under pretext of identity verification for captured partisans. 3 different poses, 3 different appearances, all me. Gold ensures discretion. The journal itself becomes the investigation's primary evidence. Written in precise German script across 127 pages of a standard Wehrmacht field notebook, it covers dates from September 8, 1944 through February 11, 1945. Each entry is dated. Most include time stamps. The writing is methodical, detailed, almost compulsive in its thoroughness. Dr. Nowak arranges for handwriting analysis at the University of Warsaw's Department of Forensic Document Examination. Senior graphologist Dr. Piotr Mazur compares the journal handwriting against authenticated samples of Hoffman's writing from military records, personal letters to his wife, and courier delivery logs. His analysis, completed October 3, 2024, concludes: the handwriting characteristics show 94.7% probability of identical authorship. Letter formation patterns, pressure points, spacing consistency, and individual character variations match the authenticated Hoffman samples. This journal was written by Carl Friedrich Hoffman. But the most dramatic evidence comes from forensic analysis of physical materials found in the freight car. October 8, 2024, Dr. Nowak's team examines the military cot in the freight car's interior. Beneath deteriorated blankets, they find human hair samples, preserved by the tunnel's dry conditions. They also recover biological material from a tin cup, dried saliva residue. These samples are transported to the Department of Forensic Genetics at the Medical University of Gdansk. Lead geneticist Dr. Anna Kowalczyk begins DNA extraction procedures. The challenge: finding surviving relatives for comparison. Military records show Hoffman's daughters, Greta and Liesel, were evacuated to Lübeck in September 1944. Post-war research by genealogist Marcus Schneider, contracted by the investigation, traces their post-war lives. Greta Hoffman married in 1956, taking the surname Brandt. She died in 2019 in Hamburg. Liesl Hoffman remained unmarried, worked as a librarian, died in 2021 in Bremen. But Greta Brandt had 2 children. A son, Thomas Brandt, born 1958, still living in Hamburg, and a daughter, Monika Brandt Fischer, born 1962, living in Munich. They are Carl Friedrich Hoffman's grandchildren. November 12, 2024. After receiving detailed explanations from investigators, both Thomas and Monika agree to provide DNA samples for comparison. Our grandmother rarely spoke about the war, Thomas tells investigators. She said her father died in 1944, that she barely remembered him. She kept one photograph of him in uniform. That was all. If there's any chance he survived, we need to know. December 4, 2024. Dr. Kowalczyk completes the genetic analysis. The mitochondrial DNA from the hair samples and saliva residue is compared against Thomas and Monika's profiles. The results: the biological samples recovered from the freight car show genetic markers consistent with a maternal line relationship to the provided comparison samples. Statistical analysis indicates 99.1% probability that the biological material originated from the maternal grandfather of subjects Thomas Brandt and Monika Brandt Fischer. Conclusion: the biological material found in the freight car belonged to Carl Friedrich Hoffman. The DNA evidence is conclusive. Hoffman was indeed in that freight car. He survived past October 23, 1944, when official records declared him dead. But for how long? And what happened after he left his hidden sanctuary? The investigation turns to the contents of the freight car's makeshift desk. Alongside the journal, investigators find a detailed hand-drawn map showing routes through forest terrain, marked waypoints and destinations labeled in code. There are also letters, drafts, never sent, addressed to his daughters. One letter, dated December 25, 1944, reads, "My dearest Greta and Liesl, I write this knowing you will never read it, for I am dead to the world and must remain so. Know that your papa thinks of you every day. I have made choices to survive that go against everything I was raised to honor, but I will not see you until after this terrible war ends and I can find a way to live again. Stay safe in the West. Remember your mother. I love you both. Papa." Another letter, dated January 30, 1945, shows his mental deterioration. "The cold is unbearable, supplies running low. The war continues. I hear Soviet artillery in the distance, getting closer. Must wait. Cannot leave until the front passes. If captured now in German uniform or civilian clothes, either way means execution. The Soviets will show no mercy to any German military personnel, especially those found hiding. Must wait." The final journal entry, February 11, 1945, suggests his decision to leave. Spring approaches. The front has moved west. Soviet control of this region is now absolute. German military presence is gone. Remaining here means dying of starvation or exposure. I must move. The false papers are my only chance. Henrik Olsen will walk out of this forest. Carl Friedrich Hoffman will remain here, sealed in this tomb of steel and wood. If anyone ever finds this record, know that I was a coward and a deserter, but I chose life over death. May God forgive me. But did Hoffman actually leave? The forensic team finds evidence suggesting he did. January 15, 2025. While conducting secondary examination of the freight car's interior, forensic technician Janek Kowalski, no relation to surveyor Thomas Kowalski, discovers a false bottom panel in the car's wooden floor. Beneath it, additional items Hoffman deliberately concealed before leaving. 3 gold bars, 2 kilograms each, Deutsche Reichsbank stamped. Approximately 47,000 Reichsmarks in cash, bundled and vacuum-sealed in waterproof oilcloth. A second journal, this one covering different dates, March 1945 through August 1949. This second journal transforms the investigation. Written in the same hand, authenticated through graphological analysis as Hoffman's, it documents his life after leaving the sealed freight car. Entry dated March 3, 1945. I have left the tunnel, walked to a village called Naruka approximately 12 kilometers north, presented myself as Henrik Olsen, Estonian agricultural worker fleeing westward German evacuation, now seeking work with Soviet-controlled collective farms. Soviet military commandant suspicious but accepted my papers. Assigned to forestry labor crew. Will work, stay quiet, survive. Entry dated July 20, 1945. Germany has surrendered. Hitler is dead. The war is over. I am alive. I am Henrik Olsen now. Carl Friedrich Hoffman died October 23, 1944 on a roadside near Goldap. His family believes him dead. Let him stay dead. I cannot return. What I witnessed, what I transported as a courier, the classified documents about operations in the East if I surface. If I am identified, I will face war crimes tribunals. Better to be Henrik Olsen, laborer nobody. The journal reveals Hoffman's post-war movements. He worked as a forestry laborer in Soviet-controlled Poland from March through September 1945. In October 1945, he used gold to bribe a border guard and crossed into the Soviet occupation zone of Germany. Entry dated October 12, 1945. Crossed near Frankfurt and Der Oder, now in Soviet occupation zone. Papers still hold as Henrik Olsen, Baltic German repatriate. Making way west toward British zone. Want to eventually reach somewhere I can disappear permanently. Entry dated February 1946. Reached Hamburg, British occupation zone. Papers examined multiple times but never challenged. Henrik Olsen's story holds. Found work at harbor reconstruction crews. Living in displaced persons camp. Thousands of refugees, no one asks too many questions. Am invisible. This is where the journal's revelations become even more significant. Entry dated June 8, 1946. Saw Greta today. She is 12 now, walking with an older woman near the Alster, my daughter. I stood 30 meters away and watched her laugh at something the woman said. She is alive. She survived. I want to run to her, embrace her, tell her Papa is alive, but I cannot. I am dead. I must remain dead. Henrik Olsen watched a stranger's daughter walk past. Carl Friedrich Hoffman died in my heart at that moment. The journal continues through 1947, 1948, and early 1949, documenting Hoffman's life as Henrik Olsen in Hamburg. He worked as a dock worker, lived in modest housing, saved money, and prepared for the next phase, permanent disappearance. Entry dated May 15, 1949. Have secured passage on merchant vessel to South America, Argentina, using Henrik Olsen papers and new identity documents acquired in Hamburg's thriving forged papers market. Many former Wehrmacht personnel making similar journeys will become Friedrich Muller in Buenos Aires. Henrik Olsen will die at sea. Carl Friedrich Hoffman is long buried. 3 names, 3 deaths, 3 lives, leaving tomorrow. The journal's final entry, dated August 8, 1949, is written aboard ship. At sea, 10 days to Buenos Aires, have destroyed Henrik Olsen papers, will emerge as Friedrich Muller, German immigrant. Argentina accepts many German immigrants, asks few questions, will find work, live quietly, die as Friedrich Muller in 20 or 30 years. My daughters will never know. This is the price of survival. This journal I will keep as my confession, my truth. The only record that Carl Friedrich Hoffman did not die in 1944, but lived, cowardly and haunted, into an unknown future. Why did Hoffman hide this second journal in the freight car's false bottom? The answer appears in a notation on the journal's inside cover. To be recovered at future date when safe to return. Evidence of my survival. Insurance against false accusations or mistaken identity claims. If I die as Friedrich Muller, this remains buried. If circumstances change, I can retrieve this proof. KFH, February 1945. But Hoffman never returned. The freight car remained sealed, his journals hidden, his truth buried for 80 years. The investigation team now faces crucial questions. Did Hoffman actually reach Argentina? Did he live as Friedrich Muller? When and where did he die? January 28, 2025. Dr. Noah coordinates with international researchers. The investigation expands to Buenos Aires. As investigators dig deeper into Hoffman's journals and cross-reference his documented movements with declassified post-war intelligence files, a disturbing pattern emerges. Carl Friedrich Hoffman wasn't alone. He was one node in a vast, sophisticated network that smuggled hundreds, perhaps thousands, of German military personnel out of occupied Europe between 1944 and 1950. The journal's second volume contains references that initially seem cryptic. Entry dated March 15, 1945. Met Forrester named Paul who understands situation, says others have passed through. Mentions Waldweg Forest Path, says I follow same road many Germans walk now going west. Entry dated October 1945. Contact in Frankfurt provided name in Hamburg. Said use code phrase Königsberg Postal Service. Man will know what it means. Dr. Noack's team brings in Dr. Friedrich Hartmann, a historian from Berlin's Center for Research on Antisemitism specializing in Nazi escape routes and post-war German fugitive networks. Dr. Hartmann, examining the journal entries, immediately recognizes the significance. What Hoffman stumbled into, Dr. Hartmann explains in his preliminary report dated February 3, 2025, was an informal but highly organized network that began forming as early as late 1944, when German military personnel recognized defeat was inevitable. Officers with access to resources, gold, cash, forged documents, began preparing escape routes. What's remarkable about Hoffman's account is that it documents the network from the perspective of someone who wasn't part of its organization, but who benefited from its infrastructure. The Waldweg reference, Dr. Hartmann notes, appears in other post-war testimonies from German veterans. It wasn't a single route but a series of safe houses, sympathetic contacts and clandestine pathways stretching from Eastern Europe westward through Germany and ultimately to embarkation points for South America, the Middle East, and neutral countries. Cross-referencing Hoffman's journal against declassified British intelligence files from 1946-19 for 9, investigators discover references to several individuals Hoffman mentions by first name or cryptic description. The contact in Frankfurt, who provided Hoffman with a Hamburg connection, appears in British intelligence reports as Redacted, a former Wehrmacht logistics officer operating in the Soviet zone, who specialized in manufacturing false identity documents and facilitating border crossings for ex-military personnel. British intelligence tracked him from 1945 through 1948, but never arrested him, using him instead as an intelligence source about German fugitive movements. The Hamburg contact, identified in Hoffman's journal only as Werner, dockworker, knows Alster district, matches the profile of Werner Schulz, a former Kriegsmarine petty officer who worked Hamburg docks from 1946 through 1953. Declassified West German police files, released in 2010, show Schulz was investigated in 1951 for suspected involvement in facilitating illegal emigration of former military personnel to South America. No charges were ever filed. But the network's scope becomes truly apparent when investigators analyze the names in Hoffman's address book, found in the freight car's original discovery. The address book contains 73 entries. Most are coded, initials, city names, and numerical sequences. Cryptographic analysis by Dr. Katarzyna Nowak, no relation to Dr. Helena Nowak, from Poland's Institute of National Remembrance breaks the code in March 2025. The numerical sequences represent dates of planned contact or departure. The initials represent individuals. The city names are destinations. When decoded, the address book reveals contacts across 7 countries: Poland, Germany, both Soviet and Western occupation zones, Austria, Switzerland, Spain, Italy, and Argentina. Dates range from October 1944 through December 1949. One entry stands out. HR München, 12.47 San Carlos. Decoded. HR Munich, December 1947. Destination San Carlos de Bariloche, Argentina. Cross-referenced against post-war German immigration records and Nazi hunter files, investigators identify a probable match. Hans Rudolf Richter, former Hoffman in Wehrmacht Quartermaster Corps, officially reported killed in Hungary, December 1944. But immigration records show a Hans Richter arriving in Buenos Aires, January 1948, declaring previous residence in Munich and occupation as accountant. Another entry, EW Hamburg 3.46 Stockholm. Ernst Wilhelm Wagner, former Oberleutnant in Army Group North, officially missing in action in Latvia, October 1944. Swedish immigration records show Eric Wagner entering Sweden from Denmark in April 1946, claiming to be a Baltic German refugee. In total, investigators identify probable matches for 41 of the 73 address book entries. Of those 41 individuals, 38 were officially listed as killed in action, missing, or presumed dead during the war's final year. Yet immigration records, bank documents, and post-war trail evidence suggest these men survived, assumed new identities, and disappeared into post-war civilian populations across multiple continents. What we're looking at, Dr. Hartman states in his comprehensive report published April 2025, is an escape network comparable in sophistication, though not in moral depravity, to the infamous Odessa network that smuggled high-ranking Nazi officials and SS officers out of Europe. But this was different. This was primarily a network used by ordinary Wehrmacht officers and soldiers who feared post-war retribution, either from Allied war crimes tribunals or Soviet capture. The logistics of such a network required substantial resources. Hoffman's journals provide detailed information about how it was financed. Entry dated September 1945. Werner explained the system. Gold is the currency of escape. Reichsmarks are worthless, but gold, silver, jewelry, these buy passage, false papers, silence. Many officers looted during the war, especially in the East. That gold now funds their escape. I used military reserve gold, taken under proper authorization, though for unauthorized purposes. Ironic that the Reich's own resources finance our flight from the Reich's collapse. Entry dated January 1946. Werner says ships leaving Hamburg for Argentina cost 500 marks per person, plus bribes to port authorities, another 200 marks. Documents cost 800 marks. Total, 1,500 marks per person, minimum. Gold at Hamburg black market rates. 1 kilogram gold bar fetches approximately 3,500 marks. My remaining gold will cover passage, with reserves for establishing new life in Argentina. But where did this gold come from? Hoffman's September 1944 requisition of 4 gold bars from Army Postal Service Unit 583 emergency reserves was documented, and in the chaos of retreat, never investigated. But multiply that scenario across hundreds of German military units withdrawing west, and the scale becomes staggering. Allied investigators in 1940, 51946, documented massive quantities of gold, currency, and valuables missing from German military treasuries, occupation administration funds, and looted materials from occupied territories. Much of it was never recovered. Post-war estimates suggest 400 to 600 metric tons of gold disappeared from German military control during the war's final months. While some was captured by Allied forces and much was seized by Soviet troops, a substantial portion simply vanished. The gold financed the escapes, Dr. Hartman concludes. Wehrmacht officers with access to funds embezzled what they could. They justified it as securing resources for survival, but in reality, they were looting the collapsing German state to fund their fugitive lives. Hoffman's 4 gold bars, approximately 16,000 marks in late war value, would have been more than sufficient to fund his complete escape and establish a new life in South America. The route Hoffman followed becomes clearer through journal entries and corroborating evidence. From the sealed freight car near Bialystok, he walked to Naroka, worked under Soviet control for 6 months, then moved west through Poland into Soviet-occupied Germany by October 1945. He likely crossed near Frankfurt and Der Oder, using forged Baltic German repatriate papers. From Frankfurt, he traveled to Hamburg via Berlin, probably using the refugee transport systems established by Allied occupation authorities, which were overwhelmed and under-monitored. He arrived in Hamburg in February 1946 and remained there for over 3 years, working, saving money, watching his surviving daughter from a distance, and preparing for the final departure. In May 1949, he boarded a merchant vessel, likely one of many ships that regularly departed Hamburg for Buenos Aires carrying legal immigrants and undocumented fugitives. Argentina, under President Juan Perón, welcomed European immigrants, including Germans, with minimal background scrutiny. Between 1945 and 1955, an estimated 50,000 German immigrants entered Argentina. A small but significant percentage were former military personnel traveling under false identities. Hoffman's intended destination, according to his journal, Buenos Aires, with possible relocation to interior regions where German immigrant communities were established and where anonymity was easier to maintain. But the investigation reveals one more disturbing element. Hoffman's network connections included individuals credibly accused of war crimes. One address book entry, decoded as KS Wien 8.48 Damascus, matches the profile of Klaus Schmidt, former Obersturmführer in the SS Security Service, SD, documented as participating in anti-partisan operations in Belarus that involved civilian massacres. Schmidt was indicted in absentia by Soviet prosecutors in 1947, but never apprehended. Syrian immigration records show a Klaus Schneider entering Damascus in September 1948 with West German travel documents. Did Hoffman know Schmidt's background? The journal offers no clear answer, but one entry from October 1945 is suggestive. Werner says many SS men use the same routes as Wehrmacht, says they have more gold, more motivation, more to fear, says I should avoid them, don't ask questions, don't get involved, just take my own passage and disappear. The network doesn't judge, it transports. This reveals the moral ambiguity of the escape network. While many users were ordinary soldiers simply fleeing the chaos and seeking survival, the same infrastructure served war criminals evading justice. The network was amoral, transactional, focused solely on facilitating disappearance for anyone with resources to pay. Hoffman wasn't a war criminal, Dr. Hartmann emphasizes. His role as a courier, while serving the German military, didn't involve combat operations or documented participation in atrocities. But by using this network, he became complicit in a system that allowed actual criminals to escape accountability. That's the moral complexity we must reckon with. The network's ultimate fate is documented in Cold War intelligence files. By 1950, Western Allied intelligence agencies, particularly CIA and British MI6, recognized that the fugitive escape routes also served as recruitment pipelines. Former German intelligence officers, Wehrmacht personnel, and even some former SS members were recruited as assets in the emerging Cold War against the Soviet Union. The escape network gradually transformed from a criminal underground railroad into a semi-sanctioned intelligence recruitment mechanism. Former German military personnel in South America, the Middle East, and elsewhere became sources of intelligence about communist activities, Soviet operations, and regional politics. The price of their cooperation was amnesia about their pasts. By 1955, active facilitation had largely ended. The network dissolved into individual contacts and informal connections. but it had served its purpose. Thousands of German military personnel had vanished into new identities, scattered across the globe, their wartime lives erased, their post-war existences constructed on foundations of false papers, hidden gold, and collective silence. Carl Friedrich Hoffman was one drop in that vast, morally murky river of escape. His journals document the individual experience of vanishing, but they also illuminate the systemic infrastructure that made such vanishing possible on an industrial scale. The second journal's final entry, August 8, 1949, leaves Hoffman aboard a ship bound for Buenos Aires, preparing to emerge as Friedrich Muller. From that point, the documentary trail goes cold. Did he actually arrive? Did he live as Muller? When did he die? Where is he buried? These questions drive the investigation's next phase, coordinated between Polish, German, and Argentine researchers. March 2025, Dr. Nowak contacts Dr. Luciana Rodriguez, a historian at the University of Buenos Aires specializing in post-war German immigration to Argentina. Dr. Rodriguez begins searching Argentine immigration records, naturalization files, and German immigrant community archives. The challenge is significant. Between 1945 and 1955, approximately 50,000 Germans entered Argentina. Immigration records from that period are incomplete, sometimes contradictory, and often deliberately vague regarding immigrants' wartime backgrounds. The Peron government's policy of welcoming European immigrants without excessive scrutiny created an environment where false identities could flourish. Dr. Rodriguez searches for Friedrich Muller, arriving in Buenos Aires between August and October 1949. She finds 17 matches. The name was common, almost generic, which was precisely why Hoffman would have chosen it. Of those 17, 3 are promising matches based on stated birth years, between 1907 and 1911, declared previous residence in northern Germany, an occupation listed as postal worker or administrative clerk, occupations matching Hoffman's actual background. April 2025. Dr. Rodriguez examines detailed files for each candidate. One entry, dated September 12, 1949, stands out. Friedrich Muller, born April 1909, Königsberg, matching Hoffman's actual birth month, year, and city. Previous residence Hamburg, occupation postal administrator, immigrant visa issued through Argentine consulate in Hamburg. Arrived Buenos Aires aboard merchant vessel MS Salta, September 1949. This is a near-perfect match, but proof requires more than coincidence. Dr. Rodriguez traces this Friedrich Muller's subsequent life through Argentine administrative records. In October 1949, he registered residence in Buenos Aires, San Telmo district, a working-class neighborhood with significant German immigrant population. In December 1949, he registered for employment with Argentine Postal Service, leveraging his stated background in postal administration. Employment records from Courier Argentino, Argentine Post Office, show a Friedrich Muller hired January 1950 as an administrative clerk at the Central Buenos Aires sorting facility. Performance evaluations note him as reliable, precise, quiet, keeps to himself. He worked there continuously until 1965. Tax records show modest income, consistent with postal clerk salary. Property records show he rented the same small apartment in San Telmo from 1949 until 1967, when he purchased a modest house in Quilmes, a southern suburb of Buenos Aires with a large German immigrant community. In 1968, Friedrich Muller applied for Argentine citizenship. His naturalization file, archived at the National Immigration Office, contains a photograph. A man in his late 50s, balding, wearing thick-framed glasses, with weathered features and a serious expression. Dr. Rodriguez sends the photograph to Dr. Nowak in Poland. The forensic team compares it against authenticated photographs of Carl Friedrich Hoffman from 1944. Facial recognition analysis, conducted by the University of Warsaw's Institute of Computer Science using age progression algorithms, returns a result: 78% probability of identical subject, adjusted for 24 years of aging. It's not definitive, Dr. Nowak reports, but it's highly suggestive. The bone structure, ear morphology, and interpupillary distance measurements show consistent correlation. Age progression from 35 to 59 years old makes exact matching impossible, but the probability is significantly above coincidence threshold. But the most compelling evidence comes from an unexpected source. May 2025, Dr. Rodriguez, following leads through Buenos Aires German immigrant community archives, locates the Quilmes Deutsche Gemeinschaft, German community of Quilmes, a social organization founded in the 1950s. The organization's archive, preserved in the community center, contains membership records, photographs from social events, and newsletters. In a newsletter from December 1972, commemorating the organization's 20th anniversary, there's a group photograph of longtime members. Among them, Friedrich Muller, identified in the caption as Postal Service retiree, member since 1968. Standing next to Muller in the photograph, Werner Schulz, identified as dock worker, Hamburg, member since 1961. Werner Schulz, the Hamburg contact mentioned in Hoffman's journal. This cannot be coincidence. Two men, both German immigrants arriving in Argentina after the war, both from Hamburg, both now members of the same German social organization in a Buenos Aires suburb, one of them matching the profile of Carl Friedrich Hoffman, the other confirmed as the Hamburg facilitator of fugitive escapes. Dr. Rodriguez investigates Werner Schulz's Argentine history. He arrived in Buenos Aires in 1961, age 54, from Hamburg. His immigration file lists previous occupation as dock worker, matching British intelligence descriptions. He lived in Quilmes until his death in 1984. His obituary in the community newsletter mentions, survived the difficult war years, rebuilt his life in Argentina, cherished friend of many German families here. The evidence suggests Hoffman and Schulz maintained contact after both immigrated to Argentina. They likely shared the bond of men who'd used the escape network, who'd fled the past, and who now lived under assumed identities in a foreign land. What was Hoffman's life like as Friedrich Muller in Argentina? Dr. Rodriguez interviews descendants of German immigrants who remember him. Frau Elsa Bergmann, age 89, whose family lived near Muller in Quilmes from 1968 until his death, recalls, Herr Muller was a quiet man, very private. He came to German community events occasionally but never spoke much about his past. He said his family died in the war, that he had no one left in Germany. He lived alone, never married. He read a lot, took walks, worked in his small garden. A lonely man, I think, carrying old sorrows. Another community member, Karl Hoffman, no relation, recalls, Muller spoke excellent German, educated German, not like a worker. He corrected people's grammar sometimes. I always thought he'd been something more than a postal clerk back in Germany, maybe a teacher or officer, but you didn't ask those questions. Many of us came from difficult backgrounds. We respected each other's silence. Did Hoffman ever attempt to contact his daughters in Germany? The investigation finds one piece of evidence suggesting he did. June 2025. Thomas Brandt, Carl Friedrich Hoffman's grandson in Hamburg, informs investigators that while sorting through his late mother Greta's personal effects in 2019, he found a sealed envelope marked not to be opened until after my death. Inside, a letter postmarked Buenos Aires, Argentina, dated November 1970, addressed to Frau Greta Brandt at her Hamburg address, sender listed as F. Muller. The letter, written in German, reads, Dear Frau Brandt, you do not know me, but I knew your father during the war. I was informed by a mutual friend that you survived and have built a good life in Hamburg. Your father would be proud. He often spoke of his daughters with great love, especially in his final days before he was killed in 1944. I write only to convey that he thought of you always and faced his death bravely. I hope this brings you some comfort. With respect, Friedrich Muller. My mother never mentioned this letter, Thomas reports. I found it among her most private papers. On the envelope she'd written in pencil, "Strange letter 1970. Who was F. Muller? Why write after 26 years?" She never investigated further, I think because it reopened painful memories. Handwriting analysis of the letter, compared against Hoffman's authenticated writing samples from his journals, shows characteristics consistent with authorship. Dr. Mazur, the graphologist, reports, "The writing shows both similarities and deliberate alterations. Letter slants are changed. Spacing is different, but underlying formation patterns match. This appears to be someone attempting to disguise their handwriting while writing, but their natural patterns emerge." High probability this was written by Carl Friedrich Hoffman. The letter suggests Hoffman, living as Muller in Buenos Aires, felt compelled to reach out to his daughter after 26 years, but couldn't reveal his survival. He crafted a message that would provide comfort: "Your father thought of you, died bravely," while maintaining his false identity. It's a heartbreaking artifact, a father's love filtered through decades of deception and fear. Did Greta suspect the truth? There's no evidence she did. To her, Friedrich Muller was a mysterious stranger who'd somehow known her father during the war. She kept the letter but never pursued its origins. Argentine death records provide the final chapter. Friedrich Muller died on March 18, 1982 in Quilmes at age 72, calculated from his stated birth year of 1909, matching Hoffman's actual age. Cause of death: myocardial infarction. He died at home, alone. His body was discovered by a neighbor 2 days later. His death certificate lists no surviving relatives. His modest estate, his house, personal belongings, savings equivalent to approximately $8,000, was processed through intestate succession and ultimately claimed by the Argentine state when no heirs came forward. He was buried in Quilmes Municipal Cemetery, Section D, Plot 247, under the name Friedrich Muller. A simple headstone reads, "Friedrich Muller, 1909-1982, Ruhe in Frieden, rest in peace." The German Community Newsletter's obituary from April 1982 notes, "Friedrich Muller, longtime member and quiet friend, has passed. He will be remembered for his dedication to our community and his dignified bearing. May he find the peace he sought." But was that grave actually Carl Friedrich Hoffman's final resting place? July 2025. At Dr. Nowak's request, and with cooperation from Argentine authorities and the Brandt family, exhumation of the Quilmes grave is authorized to obtain DNA samples for definitive identification. July 29, 2025. Forensic teams exhumed the remains from Plot 247. Despite 43 years of interment, skeletal remains are sufficiently preserved for DNA extraction. Samples are transported to both the Medical University of Gdansk and the Argentine Federal Police Forensic Laboratory for independent analysis. September 14, 2025. Both laboratories released their findings simultaneously. The genetic analysis is conclusive. The remains are a familial match to Thomas Brandt and Monica Brandt Fisher, consistent with grandfather relationship. Mitochondrial DNA matches samples from the sealed freight car in the Bialoieza forest. Nuclear DNA analysis confirms male lineage compatible with known Hoffman family genetic markers. Statistical confidence: 99.7% probability that the remains in Quilmes Municipal Cemetery, buried under the name Friedrich Muller, are those of Carl Friedrich Hoffman, born Königsberg 1909, officially declared killed in action October 1944, actually died Buenos Aires 1982. The mystery is solved. Carl Friedrich Hoffman survived the war, escaped Germany, lived 33 years under a false identity in Argentina, and died quietly in a suburban Buenos Aires house, his true identity unknown to everyone around him except perhaps Werner Schulz, his fellow fugitive from the past. He lived to age 72. He never remarried. He never revealed himself to his daughters. He worked as a postal clerk, a job close to his authentic civilian career, perhaps a way of maintaining some connection to his real identity. He lived modestly, quietly, and apparently alone with his memories and secrets. The gravestone in Quilmes, reading Friedrich Muller, marks the final lie in a life constructed on layers of false names, forged documents, and sustained deception. Beneath that stone lies Karl Friedrich Hoffman, Wehrmacht Hauptmann, deserter, fugitive, father, a man who chose survival over honor and carried that choice in silence for 38 years. The discovery of Karl Friedrich Hoffman's sealed freight car and the subsequent unraveling of his escape and false identity life raises profound ethical and historical questions that resist simple answers. Was Hoffman a war criminal? The evidence suggests not, by the strict definitions applied during post-war tribunals. His role as a military courier involved transporting classified communications, not combat operations or direct participation in atrocities. He wasn't SS. He wasn't attached to occupation administration units implicated in civilian massacres or concentration camp operations. His service record shows no disciplinary actions, no documentation of participation in war crimes. But his position gave him knowledge. As a courier for Army Group Center, he transported classified documents detailing military operations across occupied Soviet territories from 1942 through 1944. He would have been aware of the brutal nature of the war in the East. His letters to his wife in 1943, mentioning things done in Germany's name that haunted him, suggest he witnessed or learned of atrocities. Dr. Hartmann, the historian, addresses this in his ethical assessment. Hoffman represents the moral complexity of millions of German military personnel. He wasn't a zealot or ideologue. He was a bureaucrat in uniform, serving a criminal regime, aware of its crimes but not directly perpetrating them. Do such men bear moral responsibility? Unquestionably, yes. Do they deserve the same judgment as those who pulled triggers or operated gas chambers? History struggles with that distinction. The victims of German aggression on the Eastern Front, Soviet civilians, partisans, prisoners of war, Jews murdered in the Holocaust, number in the tens of millions. When Hoffman chose to fake his death and disappear rather than face post-war reckoning, he chose to evade any accounting for Germany's crimes, even the passive accounting of simply being identified, questioned, and allowed to explain his role. His daughters, Greta and Lisa, were also victims. They grew up believing their father died in 1944. They grieved him. They faced the stigma and hardship of being fatherless in post-war Germany. Greta's son Thomas, interviewed after the DNA confirmation, expressed profound ambivalence. "I don't know whether to be angry or sad. My grandmother believed her father was dead. She mourned him her entire life. But he was alive, living in Argentina, and he never told her." He sent one cryptic letter that gave her no answers. What kind of father does that? Yet Hoffman's motivations are understandable in human terms. The Eastern Front was an apocalypse. Soviet forces, having endured unimaginable brutality during German occupation, showed little mercy to captured German military personnel. Thousands were summarily executed. Thousands more died in Soviet prison camps. Even those who eventually returned to Germany spent years in horrific conditions. From Hoffman's perspective, in September 1944, facing either death in the Soviet advance or decades in captivity, desertion and escape appeared rational. His wife had been killed in an Allied bombing raid. His daughters were safe in Western Germany. He had access to resources and knowledge to disappear. Why not take that chance? We must distinguish between understanding motivations and excusing actions, Dr. Nowak emphasizes in her published analysis. Hoffman's fear was real and justified. His grief was genuine. His survival instinct was human, but his choice to disappear rather than face post-war justice, to live under a false identity, to allow his daughters to believe him dead, these were moral failures. He chose personal survival over accountability. The escape network that facilitated Hoffman's disappearance served thousands of others. The majority, like Hoffman, were ordinary soldiers, but that same network also enabled genuine war criminals to evade justice. The infrastructure was amoral, indifferent to guilt or innocence, focused solely on moving people willing to pay. This raises troubling questions about collective responsibility. Every person who used the network, even those personally innocent of specific crimes, became complicit in a system that protected the guilty. Hoffman's gold-funded passage to Argentina helped finance the network that also transported SS officers, concentration camp guards, and occupation administrators credibly accused of mass murder. The escape networks represent one of the great moral failures of the immediate post-war period, Dr. Hartman writes. Allied forces, overwhelmed by millions of displaced persons, refugees, and prisoners of war, lacked the resources and coordination to thoroughly vet every German military person. Western intelligence agencies, already focused on the emerging Cold War, prioritized recruiting useful German intelligence assets over prosecuting mid-level Wehrmacht personnel. This created space for escape networks to flourish. The question of how many escaped is impossible to answer with precision. Historians estimate between 5,000 and 10,000 German military and SS personnel successfully fled to South America, the Middle East, and other destinations using organized escape networks between 1945 and 1955. Thousands more disappeared into false identities within Europe itself, living under assumed names in Germany, Austria, France, and other countries. For the victims, Holocaust survivors, Soviet citizens who endured occupation, families of murdered partisans and resistance fighters, the knowledge that perpetrators escaped justice and lived comfortable lives under false identities represents a profound historical injustice that no tribunal can ever rectify. Yet there's a counterargument, uncomfortable but worth considering. Vengeance and mass punishment create their own injustices. The Allied policy of denazification in occupied Germany was applied unevenly, sometimes arbitrarily. Soviet treatment of German prisoners was brutally harsh, with mortality rates above 30% in some camps. Would hunting down every Wehrmacht officer who served on the Eastern Front and imprisoning or executing them have served justice, or merely extended the cycle of violence? History requires us to hold both truths simultaneously, Dr. Nowak reflects. Individual Germans who served in the military machine bear moral responsibility for enabling the regime's crimes, but collective punishment of all German military personnel would have perpetuated injustice rather than resolved it. The ethical framework for addressing these nuances remains contested 80 years later. Hoffman's life as Friedrich Muller in Argentina presents its own moral puzzle. He lived quietly, worked honestly, harmed no one. Neighbors remember him as dignified and kind. He contributed to his adopted community. By all accounts, Friedrich Muller was a good man. But Friedrich Muller was a fiction. The real person beneath that identity was Karl Friedrich Hoffman, a German officer who fled accountability, who allowed his daughters to grieve unnecessarily, who lived on resources embezzled from military reserves. Can a life built on deception be judged as good simply because the deception was maintained successfully? The letter Hoffman sent to his daughter in 1970, cryptically referencing her father without revealing his survival, embodies this moral ambiguity. It was an act of love, a father wanting to comfort his daughter. It was also an act of profound selfishness, refusing to reveal the truth that would have answered her lifelong questions about his fate. Thomas Brandt, Hoffman's grandson, summarizes the family's reaction. "We don't know how to feel. He was our grandfather, but we never knew him. My mother never knew he survived. He chose his safety over her need to know. That's hard to forgive. But he also lived through things we can't imagine. Maybe we have no right to judge. The sealed freight car in the Bialowieza forest, now preserved as a historical site, has become a focus for these ethical debates. Polish authorities, in consultation with German historical organizations and the Brandt family, have designated it as a memorial site titled The Deserter's Refuge. One story of flight and survival, 1944-1945. The site's interpretive materials, developed by an international team of historians and educators, present Hoffman's story without simplification. Visitors see the freight car, the preserved artifacts, reproductions of journal entries, photographs of Hoffman and his family, and contextual information about the war's end, escape networks, and post-war justice issues. The memorial's stated purpose: to provoke reflection on individual choices during historical catastrophe, the complexity of guilt and innocence, and the long shadows cast by war's moral compromises. Karl Friedrich Hoffman was neither hero nor monster. He was a man who made choices of survival that carried moral costs. His story asks each visitor, what would you have done? Thousands of visitors have toured the site since its opening in October 2025. Comment books reveal the profound divisions in how people interpret Hoffman's story. Some express sympathy. He lost everything and chose to live. I can't blame him. Others express condemnation. He served an evil regime and ran away from consequences. Cowardice. Many express ambivalence. I understand why he ran, but I can't excuse it. History is complicated. Perhaps that's the only honest conclusion. History is complicated. Karl Friedrich Hoffman's life resists simple moral categorization. He was a product of his time, a man caught in historical forces beyond his control, who made choices that were simultaneously understandable and condemnable. The victims who received no justice because men like Hoffman escaped accountability remain the story's most tragic element. Every German officer who fled to Argentina or Syria or Hamburg under a false name represented crimes unaddressed, questions unanswered, and families denied closure. Justice delayed is justice denied. Justice evaded is injustice perpetuated. Hoffman lived 38 years beyond his false death, died peacefully in his sleep at age 72, and was buried with dignity under a false name. Millions of his regime's victims never had the chance to grow old peacefully. That disparity is the irreducible moral fact at the heart of this story. October 18, 2025. Exactly 81 years after Karl Friedrich Hoffman sealed himself inside a freight car in the Bialowieza forest, dignitaries and family members gather at the memorial site for a dedication ceremony. Polish Minister of Culture and National Heritage delivers remarks acknowledging the site's historical significance. German ambassador to Poland speaks about the importance of remembering all aspects of World War II history, including stories like Hoffman's that complicate simple narratives. Representatives from the Institute of National Remembrance present their findings to the assembled scholars, journalists, and visitors. Thomas Brandt and Monica Brandt Fisher stand near the limestone tunnel entrance, looking at the freight car now preserved behind protective glass. Their grandfather's story has rewritten their family history. The man they thought died heroically in 1944 actually deserted, embezzled military resources, lived under a false name, and watched their mother from a distance in Hamburg without revealing himself. I came here wanting to hate him, Thomas tells a journalist from Der Spiegel. But standing here, seeing this car where he hid, reading his journal entries about his fear and grief and guilt, I don't know what I feel anymore. He was human. Flawed, frightened, selfish, but human. Maybe that's all we can say. The sealed freight car has yielded its secrets. The journals have been transcribed, analyzed, published. The DNA evidence has confirmed identity. The escape route has been mapped. The Argentine years have been documented. Carl Friedrich Hoffman's complete story from Königsberg birth to Quilmes' death is now part of the historical record. But questions remain. How many other sealed spaces exist, hidden in forests or mountains or underground chambers, containing evidence of other escapes, other false deaths, other men who vanished into new identities? Hoffman's freight car was discovered by accident during routine railway survey work. How many haven't been discovered and never will be? The escape network that facilitated Hoffman's disappearance operated for at least a decade, moved thousands of people, and left minimal paper trails. Most participants took their knowledge to their graves. Werner Schulz died in Buenos Aires in 1984, leaving no memoir, no confession, no detailed record of how many men he helped escape Hamburg for South America. The contact in Frankfurt, who provided forged papers, was never definitively identified. The ship captains who accepted gold for undocumented passengers are all dead. History has captured one story in detail because Hoffman chose to document his escape in meticulous journals and hide them in a sealed freight car. How many others escaped without documenting their stories? How many Friedrich Mullers lived quietly in Argentina, or Henrik Olsens in Sweden, or Eric Johnsons in Australia, their true identities dying with them, their pasts permanently erased? The Bialoieza forest, vast and ancient, has kept many secrets across centuries. It sheltered partisans during World War II, served as a refuge for escaped prisoners, and concealed evidence of wartime atrocities. For 81 years, it kept Carl Friedrich Hoffman's secret, his freight car swallowed by forest growth, his journals sealed in darkness, his truth hidden from the world. Now that truth is known, but the forest remains. Trees grow over the old rail lines. Limestone tunnels carved for pre-war railway maintenance sit forgotten in overgrown embankments. How many other secrets does the forest still keep? How many other stories of flight, survival, and identity lie sealed beneath layers of earth, vegetation, and time? Dr. Helena Nowak, standing near the memorial site's entrance as afternoon light filters through ancient trees, reflects on 18 months of investigation. We found Hoffman by accident. Railway engineers doing routine surveys stumbled onto a sealed tunnel containing a story none of us expected. It makes you wonder what else is out there, waiting to be found or remaining hidden forever. History is built on evidence that survived. But what about evidence that didn't? What about the stories sealed so successfully that they'll never be discovered? The memorial site's final exhibit includes a world map showing documented locations where former German military personnel were confirmed to have lived under false identities after the war. Pins mark Buenos Aires, Damascus, Cairo, Lima, Stockholm, Montreal, and dozens of other cities. Each pin represents a man who disappeared, who chose survival over accountability, who became someone else. Beside the map, a plaque poses questions to visitors. How many other pins should be on this map but aren't? How many men died under false names, their true identities never discovered? How many families still believe their relatives died in 1944, not knowing they lived decades longer under assumed names? These are questions we can ask but never fully answer. The sealed freight car answered one question. Thousands more remain sealed. Carl Friedrich Hoffman's story ends in a cemetery in Quilmes, Argentina, at a grave that bore a false name for 43 years, until exhumation and DNA analysis revealed the truth. The headstone has been replaced with one reading: Carl Friedrich Hoffman, 1909-1982, known as Friedrich Muller, died far from home. His daughters never knew he survived the war. His grandchildren learned the truth 81 years after his disappearance. His story illuminates the vast infrastructure of escape, deception, and reinvention that allowed thousands of German military personnel to vanish into post-war chaos and emerge as civilians with fabricated pasts. The moral reckoning his escape evaded in 1945 continues in history's judgment today. Scholars debate his culpability. Ethicists analyze his choices. Descendants wrestle with the legacy of a grandfather they never knew who chose survival over truth. But the forest where his sealed freight car sat hidden for 81 years asks no questions and offers no judgments. It simply kept his secret, as it has kept countless others across centuries of human conflict, flight, and survival. Sometimes the earth keeps secrets for 81 years before revealing them. Sometimes it keeps them forever. The discovery of Hoffman's sealed freight car answers one question but raises another. How many sealed cars, buried bunkers, hidden chambers, and forgotten graves across Europe still hold secrets of vanished men, false identities, and truths that will never be known? The forest stands silent, holding its answers,